Did you know every 4 years, Bitcoin's reward literally gets sliced in half? This is called the Bitcoin halving, and it has huge effects on the Bitcoin price. I'm Brett at CryptoGX, and in this video, I'll talk to you about the Bitcoin halving, what it is, how it affects the price of the entire crypto market, as well as Bitcoin, and where we currently stand in the Bitcoin halving cycle. So with all of that, let's start off. What is this Bitcoin halving thing all about anyway? And why does it really shake up the price in any given cycle? So here's how it works. In the Bitcoin world, miners create new Bitcoin and add them to the total supply that is out there. These miners use powerful computers to solve very tricky math problems. When they solve one of these problems, they add what's called a block to Bitcoin's digital record book, which is called the blockchain. Now think of a block as the last page where all of the Bitcoin transactions get written down. That is what a block contains, is a set of Bitcoin transactions. Imagine, it's written down in a book where it's literally a piece of paper. Each page is a new block recording all of those transactions. Now, for the miners, processing all of these transactions and doing the tricky math equations and things like that, they are then rewarded for processing these transactions with brand new Bitcoins. And every 4 years or so, which is technically after every 210,000 blocks, something pretty wild happens. After those 210,000 blocks or pages of transactions get processed, the reward for miners gets cut in half. So that is what the halving is. It's when that reward is cut in half, meaning the amount of Bitcoin that miners get in total for each processed block gets cut into half of what it previously was. So it's not random, but really instead it's written into the code of Bitcoin and has been since day one. And really this is kind of like a timer that keeps on ticking and keeps on going. So fewer Bitcoins are then hitting the market every time this happens for the next 4 years. Now this is a little bit tricky, but the main thing that we're probably really focused on here is, does it impact the price of Bitcoin? And the simple thing is to consider supply and demand. When less and less Bitcoin are hitting the market, the supply is getting smaller and smaller, or at least the new supply of Bitcoin is getting smaller and smaller. But if we consider the demand, or people still wanting Bitcoin, as the same as before, so when you have fewer new Bitcoin hitting the market every day within these mining processes and the new blocks hitting, as well as those rewards being paid out, the supply, or at least the new supply, is getting smaller and smaller. But if we consider the people that still want to buy Bitcoin staying the same, or even more, really, they're gonna be willing to pay to get their hands on it. So to simplify, less stuff, bigger hunger equals the price increasing. Now to really put this into perspective, I'm gonna compare it to gold, which Bitcoin very often gets compared to gold. The harder it is to dig up gold, the more precious it gets. If you think back to the gold rush in California in the 1800s, it was very easy to find gold comparatively to how it is now. It's much harder to find gold. So it costs more to mine it, and the supply is, or at least the new supply, is getting smaller and smaller. And you see that with the price of gold increasing every day. Bitcoin's halving does the same trick. It makes Bitcoin more scarce over time. And since there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins in total, each halving brings us closer to that cap. The first halving event occurred on November 28th in 2012. Miners were receiving 50 Bitcoins per block before the event, and this reward dropped to 25 Bitcoins afterwards. At this point, the price traded around $12 before the halving, and then surged to over $260 within 1 year. This really reflects the true impact of a halving event due to the increased scarcity. The second halving happened on July 9th, 2016. The reward fell from 25 to 12.5 Bitcoins per block. Now the price started approximately at $650 and then climbed dramatically, reaching almost $20,000 by December of 2017, which was an even stronger market response this time around, or at least this cycle compared to the previous cycle. Now the third halving event happened on May 11th of 2020. The reward decreased from 12.5 to 6.25 Bitcoins per block. With a pre-halving price of around $8,000 per Bitcoin, it rose to over $60,000 by April of 2021, thanks to the insane demand. Now the fourth and most recent halving took place on April 20th, 2024. The reward halved from 6.25 to 3. 1.125 Bitcoins per block. The price started around $60,000 and has fluctuated, but recently recorded an all-time high of above $120,000 by July of 2025. Each halving consistently reduces the supply and sends Bitcoin demand into new heights. We're currently in the fourth halving cycle, and the next halving is expected to happen in about 140,000 blocks. That 140,000 blocks is expected to happen sometime around May of 2028. Now you can look up the Bitcoin halving countdown that shows the next halving event is around 990 days away in that May 2028 timeframe. And this changes a little bit, but it's based on the blocks, as I mentioned before, not necessarily the days. The days are an estimate of how many blocks could likely occur by that time. You can find this timing estimate on CoinGecko.com. It's very easily available right there, just in case you want to track this yourself. Now, one thing to notice here is that the price moves in cycles, and each cycle has one Bitcoin halving event. If we could analyze the price action of Bitcoin in the previous cycles, we can predict the price movement during the current cycle. Now, the last halving cycle started in May of 2020. For 40 weeks, Bitcoin's price remained very bullish for a very long time. It went from about $10,000 to $50,000, or maybe about $60,000 by February of 2021. That is a 400 to 500% increase in just 40 weeks, which is less than a year, obviously. After that, there was a brief pause, a 50% drop to 30,000, but then Bitcoin soared again to about 69,000 by November of 2021. So the total time of rising prices was about 78 weeks, with the 40-week increase being the very beginning part of that particular cycle. The current halving cycle started in April of 2024. We've just finished our 40-week period of rising prices. Bitcoin started around $60,000 to $65,000 and climbed to about $110,000 to $115,000 by January of 2025. As of July of 2025, it's been around $120,000, near its highest point ever. Now, during this cycle, the 40-week gain was about a 70 to 98% increase, which is still a lot, but not as big as the 400% from the last cycle. Now, the 40-week interval is specifically referencing the previous halving cycle rather than the ones before that. Most of the time, we have seen more of a steady gain instead of a huge 50% pullback and then gain back to about where it was when it was 60,000 down to 30 up to 69,000. So this particular interval is not exactly what we're going to be wanting to look at, more so the beginning of the halving to the end of the bull cycle where it has its final major pullback. So the $60,000 number is where we're looking at, which was at about the 78 weeks. So beyond that, we're going to look at why the gains are different over each cycle. So first off, Bitcoin is much bigger now. In 2020, its total value or market cap was much smaller. As you can see here, in August of 2020, it was about $220 billion. Because of this size difference, prices could change much more easily. As you can see at the end of the chart here, with a market cap of over $2.3 trillion, it takes much more money to move the price in the same percentage. So for example, if we wanted the price as of right now of Bitcoin to double, we would need another $2.3 trillion to go into Bitcoin to equate that 100% gain. Back in 2020, the $220 billion in order to double would only need another $220 billion. So that's why the percentage increases are smaller, even though the dollar amounts are very large. Now, to put that into comparison of the Bitcoin price compared to the last cycle Bitcoin added about $40,000 to $50,000 in 40 weeks. This time, in the same period, it added about $50,000 to $55,000 to the price of Bitcoin. So we can say that the current cycle is more bullish in the sense of inflows to the Bitcoin market. Now, those bullish inflows are one thing, but we're very curious, obviously, what might happen next. In the last cycle, after the first 40-week period, Bitcoin didn't stop. It dropped 50% and then rose again for 38 more weeks to hit its new peak. We're only 15 months into this cycle, and last time the peak came around 18 months. This could mean that there's still room for growth, maybe to 150,000 or 180,000 by early 2026, but it's not all perfect. There are warning signs that growth might slow. The first thing to look at is trading volume. This is the amount of Bitcoin that is bought and sold. It has recently gone down by about 1% as of July 2025. This also happened in 2021 before a big price drop. Now, the price drop obviously is concerning, but the market is much more mature now with big companies and governments involved. So this might mean a smaller price change or even a slow rise or stable level around 130,000 to 150,000. In 2020, Bitcoin grew because of things like COVID stimulus checks and low interest rates. People had lots more money to invest, and Bitcoin looked really good. This time we have some challenges. We've got inflation, possible higher interest rates, and new rules from different governments. So this could limit how high Bitcoin goes, or cause a drop even sooner, especially with lots of different geopolitical pressures. And yet on the other hand, we have positive developments like the crypto favored regulatory environment and the Genius Act from the US government that gives very bullish sentiment to the market. So if we want to boil all of this down to its most simple level from the start of this video, each halving makes Bitcoin more rare and harder to mine. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins, and every halving brings us closer to that limit. Now this scarcity can push prices up over time, especially if more people want Bitcoin in each halving. The more traction it gets, the more eyes are on Bitcoin and the more people are going to be wanting it. Now on top of all that, the future halving events will make it more difficult to mine new Bitcoins, and less Bitcoin will be rewarded after each halving event. Outside of that, with companies accepting Bitcoin, new investment options like ETFs, and people seeing it as a way to store value, the demand is very likely to stay strong and increase over time. So where we're at in the current cycle versus where we were at in the previous cycle, the percentage increase is less dramatic than that last cycle, but that's kind of normal as Bitcoin gets bigger. We might see a drop, another rise again, which is common, but if the past is a guide, it could be a shorter pause before another rise. We've seen Bitcoin come down a bit from its highs above 120,000 and it's moving sideways. That happens before every next skyrocket. It's just an opportunity to buy Bitcoin before it gets more expensive. We're also still waiting for altcoin season. As you can see right here on the altcoin season index, we're still in Bitcoin season. Essentially that means where the money is flowing, the typical price increases and things like that. If we scroll down, there's plenty of top coins doing crazy numbers as well, but most often in an entire Bitcoin cycle, you will see Bitcoin fly first, then it will kind of get stagnant over time, sideways. Money will flow out of Bitcoin and into altcoins. They will all start rising and going crazy, and more money will flow into Bitcoin as well. So keep an eye on the altcoin season index while this cycle is progressing to know when you might expect the Bitcoin bull cycle to end. If we see altcoin season really be full in effect, that's when we're going to start watching for the next potential Bitcoin drop. So let me know what you think about this particular Bitcoin cycle, where you think the price might be going. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. If you're ready to get into some Bitcoin or any other altcoins, I put links to Coinbase and crypto.com in the description where you'll get at least $50 of crypto just for signing up with those links. And if you really want to get into some meme coins, I left a link to MoonShot where you can claim some free meme coins for signing up with that link as well. If you learned something new or just enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and hit subscribe if you want to stay tuned for all things crypto. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.